Right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Extraordinary Planning, Transport, Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 30th of August, 7 p.m. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. There's just one apology this evening from Councillor Hartstein, and she's been substituted by Councillor John Kent.
Brilliant. No one's brought any items of urgent business to the committee. Have we got any declarations of interest? Brilliant. So we'll start off the question and answer session with C2C on the potential impact of ticket office closures. Our guest here is Abu. He's a Customer Experience Director at C2C. He's going to be sharing a presentation that's been sent to Democratic Services, and that's going to be shared with all committee members. So we can get straight on to questions. Does anyone want to start? Councillor Watson.
Thank you. And thank you for actually coming to this meeting. It was me that put the motion, me and Councillor Maney put the motion together on this to actually come here. So I have obviously got quite a few concerns. And one of them is that there's a consultation that is currently taking place. It's due to finish tomorrow. In that consultation, it's looking at 5 out of the 7 stations that will be closed. The 2 that's remaining, if I'm correct, is going to be Grays and Chafford. However, there is also issues on the other stations. Why I personally think that it's completely wrong that we are now looking at closing these stations. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what services are going to be continued to offer into these 5 where, you know, we're going to be losing ticket offices, and the ticket offices are there for our vulnerable and our elderly, as well as those that can't use the machines. And to be frank, in my world, Perfectly on Thames machine is broke quite often, and they don't know how to use them. So can you just give us about how all of that will happen? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, just to clarify, the wording is really important. Stations aren't closing. There is a proposal there to reduce or close ticket office opening hours, which I think you did clarify there. So that's to be really clear on that point. In terms of the C2C specific elements, I'm a local resident myself. I live in Chafford 100 and have done for years. And I think one thing that's been really important for us, and of course there are 13 other train companies in the country that are looking at making changes like this, the one thing that I can say honestly and categorically, C2C doesn't have lots of staff. That's, when you compare us with other train operating companies, we don't. And that's why one of our clear markers is that we would not have any sort of compulsory redundancy scheme, so you won't see a reduction in the numbers of staff. I think that's a really important element to bring forward and be firm on. We are not proposing a reduction in the number of people. In terms of the roles changing, one of the things that's been done before my time, and my role is 6 months old and I'm in this post for 6 months, is that the multi-skilling element, so this is that people can come out the ticket offices and actually do other types of service, so helping with ticket machines, for example, that isn't something that many other train companies currently have negotiated and consulted already internally. C2C doesn't have that issue, so we already can ask our staff to move from ticket offices to do other jobs. I think what we also find is it's a very, very peaky railway. So in my station, Chafford 100, the ticket office is relatively quiet. And part of the reason for that is because it's a contactless and Oyster pay-as-you-go area. One of the other red lines for C2C is that nothing will happen, nothing will move forward until we've got contactless tickets across the entire route. So you'll be able to go from Fenchurch Street through to Shoebury-Ness with contactless, so you can tap in with your credit card in London and, you know, get off on the seaside and South End. So I think that's an important element, and that'll take care of a huge chunk of customers too. We also have something coming in called barcode tickets, and again, that's a really important thing for this to work. And that's where you can buy a ticket and download it without even having to interact with a machine or a person. You scan it and you can go straight through. And the good thing with that is lots of other train companies already have it. Going back to the crux of the issue, I think, which is around being there for elderly, vulnerable people and actually being very tuned into what's going on locally, there is an uptick in antisocial behaviour. There's no question for me. We've had many meetings with a number of councillors from Thurrock around what we're seeing at Lakeside, for example, and I do not think, and categorically do not state, that the answer is less staff. It's not that, absolutely not. But we need varied roles and we need different types of people doing different types of jobs. So from our perspective, we want people to have productive jobs, because very often you can go into a ticket office and find that you've got people there doing nothing. I happen to be at Thorpe Bay on the other side of our route today, and the ticket office was quite busy. So I do agree that different customers have different needs. Not all of those people will be using contactless or barcode tickets, but we're not proposing to remove staff. And that's why when you look at the consultation hours, we've compared ticket office opening hours with staffing hours, which is, again, just to reiterate that we're not proposing to really reduce staff numbers.
Would you like to follow up at all?
Thank you. So I will tell you what's going on with some of my residents that are quite elderly. They can't even really access the parking permits on the Thurrock Council website. So them to have something downloaded onto a smartphone, onto their phone, that is really not going to happen. And also, especially in public, in terms that machine actually breaks, and they don't have contactless, they go with cash. So they do use the ticket office quite a lot. And they also, what they have asked me, because they are worried about their ticket office actually being closed, is if it's not working at all and there's nobody about, can they just get on a train? And then what happens? Because actually one of my residents did that and got fined because there was somebody on the train. So you have got the younger generation. I totally get that. I use mine all the time. I tap in. But unfortunately, someone like my mother doesn't. And will literally go and speak to the man or the woman asking for a ticket. So how are you going to help with all of that? And also on this platforms itself, for anybody that's in a wheelchair or blind or anybody with vulnerability, how is that going to be helped on the platforms and navigating themselves through? Will the staff be there to be able to help to do all of that sort of stuff? And for what sort of time frame? Because in Tilbury, they're there quite late at night. Are we going to stop those staff being on those stations and when the young people are coming back from London? And believe you me, I've done that quite a few times as well, and the trains are packed. So are they going to be there to be able to help that? And also they're there for health and safety reasons. Like there has been countless things where young girls have run to the ticket offices when they're not happy or they're scared about something. So I'm really looking for answers on all of this, why this is going to happen. And I think my last question, sorry, Chair, is when will the consultation come through? How is it going to be, how are you looking at that? And how are you going to make a decision on whether these stations are going to be closed or not? How does that also work and what's the timeline? Thank you.
Thank you. A number of questions to try and respond to. Again, one of the unique positions that C2C has is that every single one of our stations has a cash ticket vending machine as an option. So if somebody comes to the station with cash, they should be able to buy a ticket. Now, of course, you're right that not everybody's comfortable using machinery, let alone, smartphones, etc. The point about having, and what we've described loosely as a floor walker role, is for someone to be there to provide that support, guidance, and just that reassurance that this is how you buy a ticket. On that specific example, according to the National Rail Conditions of Travel and according to the railway bylaws, if there is no means of buying a ticket, the person is absolutely within their rights to board the train and to buy at the other end or from an inspector. So I'm very sorry they were fined, and I'm happy to look into that one specifically. That is not correct. That's not in accordance with the railway bylaws. The other thing I would mention, and I think people mustn't underestimate the skill that's required in doing a job like a ticket office role. It's a very, very knowledgeable, skilled role, and the types of people that tend to go there are, they may be the more vulnerable or elderly, but they may also be people that are buying slightly more complex tickets that they may not be comfortable buying because they don't buy them every single day. And again, just to reiterate, we are planning to keep the floor walker roles. Their hours are clearly laid out on the consultation pages of the website. And in addition, to answer the other point around, having staff there from a safety perspective, yes, again, we've described what the station staffing hours will look like, and they're far beyond that. On the stations where we've said closed or no staff, in reality, what that means is mobile staff. So it doesn't affect us so much outside of Purfleet. But between Purfleet, Rainham and Dagenham Dock, we have mobile members of staff. We have CCTV cameras constantly watching all of those stations. So you will have a roving member of staff that can get to those stations if somebody, for example, turns up and requires assistance. That's something that's been in place for several years. And of course, we monitor any accessibility complaints or issues that come in around that. On the process side of things, whilst the public consultation closes in a couple of days, so 1st of September, the London Travel Watch and Transport Focus, where you'll need to send any of your views and concerns to, because Thurrock is split over both of these areas, they will be responding back to the train operating companies by the 6th of October, although, as I understand, because of the volume of responses they've had, there may be a request to extend that, which hasn't been formally agreed yet, but from a C2C perspective, we would absolutely support giving extra time. We've also been pushing people and encouraging people to participate in the consultation. It's not something we've done sneakily. We've printed out leaflets that are not part of the obligations. Every 10 minutes at all of our stations, announcements are made about the process and about taking part. So we're very keen to get people's views and perspectives. But one of the other things I would, really like to emphasize, as I touched on earlier, people are highly skilled in these roles. They need to be adequately trained and constantly retrained as well. And that's something that we're championing and pushing really hard, because what staff have to deal with on this line is incredibly diverse. On the one hand, you may have an elderly family couple that you're dealing with that requires a bit of support and assistance. On the other hand, within minutes, you could be dealing with somebody that's jumped over a gate, and that can happen within seconds. It happens every single day. So training and equipping people with things like phones, body-worn cameras, that's essential.
Councillor Kent.
So I'm just interested in learning a little bit more about, for instance, this floor walker role. So if we take a station at random, and I'll let you choose. You said earlier that you go into ticket offices where there are people sitting there doing nothing. I'd like to know how many people employed at a station of your choosing. How many of those are in the ticket office? You said no compulsory redundancies, so same level of staffing on day one of the new regime. So tell me what those people are going to be doing instead of staffing a ticket office.
Thank you, Councillor. So in reality, the detailed proposals around the rostering haven't been worked through. So a proposal was submitted to the Department for Transport, who review that proposal and they decide whether it has merit or does not. We then consult. Now, if it comes back that actually what we've proposed at Ockenden isn't acceptable, but what we've proposed at Grays hypothetically is far in excess of what we need, we would be asked to review that. But in terms of as an absolute overall number, there is no proposed reduction. There wouldn't be that.
So my question was, you've got the same amount of people staffing the station on day one of the new regime. What are those people going to be doing?
Thank you, Councillor. So the people there will be doing a multi-skilled role. They will actually, in many cases, be doing the same role as many of them do on overtime today. So while somebody may be employed in a substantive post of working behind the ticket office, I can name several of them around our local stations here. In the new world, they'd be in a role where they may not be behind the ticket office, but they'll be doing dispatching of trains where required. They'll be providing general customer service and working on gate lines. One of the questions that's come up around accessibility is, in today's world, you can go to a station and you may be visually impaired or in a wheelchair and you know that you can go to a ticket office, and I accept that. But I do feel that there are certain stations where getting to the ticket office may in itself be inaccessible, and with a roving role, we've got the benefit of having somebody that is a little bit more flexible, so that may, and that hopefully will bring some benefits for us. Just going back to an earlier point that was made around the process, we're not envisaging that any changes that come on the back of this. So once Transport Focus and London Travel Watch have given us their perspectives and have supported or have challenged our proposals, it could take up to several years for things to be implemented. We're not expecting things to happen overnight. The process may commence. It may commence from early next year, subject to contactless payment coming in, as I mentioned, and subject to a number of other measures being met. But this process could take quite some time when you look at the national picture.
So moving on, back end of last year, there was an incident at Tilbury Town Station where a member of staff was attacked, and that member of staff and others sought shelter security within the ticket office, because that clearly can be locked. What arrangements are you going to make sure there are kind of refuges to keep staff safe?
Thank you, Councillor. Every single station will have a place of safety. That won't change. So we will have CCTV. In fact, we've got excellent CCTV coverage already. We are rolling out body-worn videos to every single member of staff. So at the moment, you'll see a number of security staff. They have the body-worn cameras that they wear on the jackets. Body-worn videos will go to all members of staff. But fundamentally, to answer your question, every single station has a point and a place of safety. I've been on our stations as well, and at times, you know, the reality is, because of the areas that we serve and because of some of the antisocial behaviours that can crop up, we do need our staff to know that they can retreat to a place of safety. They will have somebody remotely monitoring them as well, and they can send the police quickly. And, you know, recent examples of where we've had vandalism, for example, not necessarily in Thurrock. I know there was a couple of issues at Stanford, but at Basildon, for instance, there was quite severe vandalism carried out. The member of staff didn't move from the place of safety, but was able to call British Transport Police, who were able to come and take the criminal away. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on a few of Councillor Watson's points. So you've obviously made these changes. If a customer, and this is on your website, is unable to purchase a specific ticket before boarding the train because they're unable to, with no ticket office, they would be able to purchase one during their journey. Obviously, it's just been explained that someone's been fined. Could you explain that actual process? Because how could you distinguish between someone who's generally got on the train and someone who's jumped the fence? And clearly, in this instance, somebody who's innocent has been issued a fine. It's going to be very difficult, no matter what process is in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. This is not an uncommon claim that people make. And again, as I mentioned, you know, the rollout of things like smartphones is really, really important. So every single member of staff, if I was to encounter somebody that says the ticket machine wasn't working or the ticket office was closed, they'll be able to check remotely if that was true or not. If it is not true, and if there's no evidence to support the person's claim, then potentially, yes, they would be issued the fine. But to be able to remotely check the status of things like ticket vending machines, that's key to this.
I think what I'd say on that is that we're talking about a circumstance here where an individual is saying they can't use the ticket machine rather than that the ticket machine's not working. Now, there's no policy at the moment for someone who can't use a ticket machine that would protect them from a fine, is there? And how is that going to be worked out in this scenario?
This is where the discretion of the revenue protection officers is really essential. They have to, and they're highly trained, they will have to ask their 6 or 7 questions that they tend to ask to try and establish whether this is a likely true story or whether it's something that's been fabricated. They have a database of people that have regularly committed fare evasion, so they'd be able to see if this is a one-off or if it's the 3rd time that you happen to have not been able to buy a ticket, for instance. We do have a buy before you board policy. Of course, we can apply discretion. And every morning when I stand at Fenchurch Street, there are a number of people that come and they'll say things like the ticket vending machine wasn't working. We can quite quickly and quite easily check that. But for those instances where somebody says that they couldn't use it, that's exactly why we would want the floor walker support there as well.
Are your revenue team on any sort of commission?
There is a scheme. It's something that I've been picking up with our head of revenue protection and security, who also happens to live in the Thurrock area, and it's something that I'd like to encourage and see more of. We're currently recruiting more revenue protection and security officers, which I'm sure you'll all be very pleased with. I certainly am.
I just think that's a slight conflict of interest when using discretion. If you're in receipt of commission for every fine that you hand out.
There are no incentives. There is no bonus currently for any fines that are handed out. I'm aware of other train operating companies that would have schemes such as you will be issued a bonus, or you will achieve your objectives if you deliver X number of penalty fares or unpaid fares notices. Our staff aren't currently on that, but we could certainly look at something, and I'd be more than happy to pick up with anyone here to make sure that we're all comfortable and happy with that.
Any more, Councillor Watson? I think my main concern is that we don't have firm details of different scenarios, because they haven't been worked out yet, where, you know, the many different scenarios where a vulnerable or elderly customer could turn up at your station and find that one of your staff is in a different part of the station, what happens then? So I'm of a mind that I can't be comfortable backing this scheme until we see those things fleshed out. And I know that a lot of those things will come through the consultation. But from your perspective, what happens in that situation? So someone blind comes to the ticket office. They know that's a focal point. They know that if they go there, they will get the assistance they need. And previously, that person, and I understand that no company wants idle staff for any length of period who haven't got any work to do. And so you're giving those staff more productive workload, but part of that productivity will be leaving the floor at the front of shop. What happens in that situation? Is there a way that is there going to be some sort of call system? Is there going to be an alarm system where that staff can be called if there's a disabled resident that needs that floor staff to come back to front of shop?
Thank you, Councillor. I think this would almost sound like a cop-out, but I think that's exactly the type of detail that we're looking to come from the outputs of the consultation. These may be the types of red lines where it's mandatory that there is a call point when you arrive at a station. For example, all of our stations have customer information, customer help points. So it could be the direction that we say to members of the public. If you arrive at the station and you require assistance, you push that button to call the member of staff. That type of detail, you're right, hasn't been mandated yet, but there's no reason why it couldn't be. And if that's something that Thurrock felt should be part of the process, then it absolutely needs to form the submission which would then go to London Travel Watch and to Transport Focus.
Can you give us any detail about the station specific at the moment, about Thurrock, obviously, not other areas, about which stations have the most inactive ticket offices?
It won't surprise anyone to know that the more inactive stations are the ones that already have contactless and Oyster pay-as-you-go options. So the busier ones, the likes of Tilbury Town, for example, that is a busier station because it falls outside of that area. And that's why for us, it's really important that nothing progresses until the rollout of CPay, contactless payments.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I'm really interested at the 7 stations. I'm assuming that Grayson and Chafford have been chosen to stay open because they're the most busiest. However, so is Tilbury, so is Ockenden, parts of Purfleet is, and out to East Tilbury. So all of the stations are busy. Has any feasibility study been done at all on the amount of people that are using those stations? Just for you to say, well, not you personally, but C2C, say we keep Grays, which I get, it's our town centre. And Chafford, I'm assuming, because that sits in Lakeside. But has there anything been done?
Thank you, Councillor. I think one clarification. In terms of the proposals of which stations would remain open in Thurrock, it's only Grays. So all the other ticket offices in Thurrock would be closed, including Chafford. So Chafford was not... apologies, Councillor. Sorry, just to clarify, it is just Grays. Prior to my arrival, there was quite a detailed process conducted where every single station had a profile mapped out. That profile was mapped out based on antisocial behaviour and crime. It was based on station footfall. It was based on ticket sales, and it was based on a number of other factors, which again are all listed out on the website. And based on those proposals, that's what the proposed staffing models were derived from. Those staffing models haven't been worked out in detail, but it's those inputs that we've looked at that on the back of it, we feel that that Grays would be the sensible station to retain its ticket office.
So you've mapped out, even though Chafford sits in Lakeside in two massive private estates where people are working, that's not been taken into consideration for the level of footfall that's used in those stations, plus the people that come in and park in the car parks to use that station. So that hasn't been taken into consideration. And Tilbury, well, we all know Chafford is going through ASB because you've actually been in the meetings where they've actually had to get the police involved. Tilbury has got a higher level football because that's the end of the line for that part. So there's a massive amount that goes down there and there's regeneration going on there. So Thurrock is sitting in the heart of a regeneration, what they want to do anyway. And actually we're closing 6 ticket stations where I thought it was actually just the 5. I'm right there, yeah? I'm a bit shocked and surprised, to be honest, that we've now took Chafford out and there's no sort of feasibility really study being done on exactly what's going on and what is projected to happen within this borough anyway.
So it was based on historic data. So the historic data demonstrated that the vast majority of people in Chafford Station, the station that I use daily, they use contactless and CPay, and they use Oyster Pay as you go. So that seems to be the method that people choose to travel, and particularly from London. They tap in, they tap out. In terms of the other points around antisocial behaviour, as of Monday, I know that Stanford Le Hope, we've got a significant increase in the levels of security staffing at that station. We've had a very, very successful trial, even in the short time that I've been here, where we've boosted the number of security staff at Grays Station. So that's a different role from the ticket office, I appreciate. And the scope and the mandate for the ticket offices is quite different from the staffing levels at the station more generally. But what we're seeing is far more revenue coming back. We're seeing far more ticket sales just by having a really good security presence at Grays. And that's why as of Monday, we'll be expanding that process out to other stations, but including Stanford Le Hope as well, where we know that there's a risk of and there's a higher level of fare evasion, which we obviously want to tackle. But in terms of taking things into account, absolutely it's been taken into account. And Chafford Station it's an extension of London. People generally want to tap in and tap out, which will be made easier for them as they come from the east as well as from the west. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've nearly run out of time with Abby, but one question I've quickly before you leave is that what are C2C's main concern? What's your main fear about this change? Because there must be some.
So first of all, apologies. I mean, at fairly short notice, I would have wanted to have stayed for the duration of this evening, but I can't. My main concern is I was brought in 6 months ago, having worked for 2 major train operating companies in the country and Transport for London. I've had the benefit of, sitting on trains up and down the country with lots of staffing and lots of, great customer experience ideas and initiatives. I didn't take this role up and I didn't come to make the experience worse for my neighbours, for the community, for residents, for my friends. I do not want the perception to be that it will be all negative. I feel that because it's a national story as well, that things are being misunderstood, and there are certain Thurrock-specific and C2C-specific things which are being overlooked in the noise that's happening more broadly. For me personally, I want there to be a better customer experience. I want really well-trained, visible, friendly, engaged staff. I don't want anything that this proposal will come out with to make things worse. I also recognise that nationally disabled people do not take as many journeys per day, per annum, as what non-disabled customers do. I want to equalise that number. So therefore, for me, it's really important that we don't end up thinking that things are worse or potentially making things worse. That's not the intention, and that's why for us, for Rob Mullen, who's our managing director, he's been here for just over a year himself, we are adamant that we are not doing things to make the experience worse. We're also realistic. We have significant cost challenges because so many commuters now are working from home. We are in a loss-making situation. We don't want to be there. We want to be efficient, but equally we don't want to do things which are going to damage the long-term recovery. I do not think a worse experience is what's going to get us back to profitability, and that's not what we're proposing.
Just been told that I didn't see Jackie Maney, Councillor Maney, put her hand up. So do you want to quickly ask one quick question, and then we'll be finished, okay? Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry, I know you need to be away. Just recently, I found a young gentleman collapsed on the grass verge in Averley, where I live. I couldn't wake him up. He was unconscious. Spent a bit of time with him. Eventually, established he had serious difficulties. I think it was actually spina bifida that he had. I managed to get him up. I think he'd been on a night out. I think he hadn't been taking his meds and whatever else he had taken. Don't know. But I managed to get him up. Councillor Maney over there had to be somewhere else, so I called my mother-in-law and she got me and him in the car. It was a very difficult situation. He said he had money, he had a wallet. I took him to Ockenden Station and I had a hell of a job convincing the ticket officer that he wasn't drunk. Now, between the ticket officer and somebody he'd pulled through to assist, they had a debate on whether he should let him through, should he make him stay. Eventually, I was allowed to take him through to the station and I sat with him until his train come, and I was assured that somebody at the other end would take care of him when he got out. That would have been a whole different scenario, I think, with nobody there. And for me, it just doesn't sit well. It wouldn't have ended well for him as well as it did anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a really difficult one to listen to, and it's exactly why I'm so focused on making sure we've got the right people and we provide them with the right training as well. These are things that happen in life, and this is where people should have the ability to make a discretionary call. So we want people empowered, appropriately trained up, and not in fear of getting in trouble for doing what's clearly the right thing. There are tools in place. Absolutely, they should have allowed that person to travel. Absolutely, they should have called ahead and said that we need somebody, assisted at the destination station as well. Even if there are no staff on that station in that moment, there are mobile staff. So on the consultation where it says closed and unstaffed, what it means is that there'll be somebody who'll be fairly close by. There'll be body-worn cameras, as I mentioned, which I'm hoping that we can get those live monitored as well remotely. But of course, the CCTV is live monitored. So if you're able to push the help point button, you should be able to get that support that you're looking for. But in that scenario, it was really difficult to listen to, because an appropriately trained up, empowered and equipped person would have handled that very differently, and it wouldn't have required your persistence in the way that it did. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your time. It's really appreciated, and I'm sure we'll have some more rail interested issues in the future, and it'll be a pleasure to have you back. Thank you. So I'd like to open this. What I would like to come out of this is for us to reach consensus on a consultation response to add to the national consultation. Now, I know that might be, I thought it might be more difficult than it is, because I think there is a consensus in the room about a lot of the issues in this matter. So, just to throw it out there, my response personally would be this committee or Thurrock Council could not support these changes unless C2C addressed the following concerns. And then we could add in any concern that members of this committee had and make that format as our consultation response. Would there be any objection to that method going forward? Each member could email in their red line, and then we could get that put together by tomorrow and submitted tomorrow with agreement of all members. Is that something that would be happy with, that line? Yeah. Brilliant. Good stuff. Excellent. So I actually thought, when he said half an hour, I was thinking, but it was actually, if we'd had an hour, I think that we got to where we wanted to get. We know that there are a lot of holes still in the processes if this happens. I think we've learnt that tonight, that there isn't really a solid plan after these closures. And that's what we need to see before any councillor would possibly give their consent to a change like this. So I'm really pleased that we can together put that consensus view forward and get everything in to Cllr and the guys in Democratic Services, and we'll get that forward and we'll get that put out tomorrow, and I'll make sure I look out for that and get that signed off with everybody, okay? Floor's open, so if anyone else wants to chip in at this point, then they're more than happy to. Brilliant. So that deals with the substantive business on the agenda, but I did want to go back to the work programme because we now have 2 extra meetings in the calendar that are going to be, the dates have only been agreed today and they're being put out today, and those dates are, Cllr?
Thank you, Chair. The proposed dates for the extraordinary meetings in September and November is the 28th of September and the 15th of November.
Brilliant. Now, obviously these extraordinary meetings have to have a focus, so I don't see any better forum than here tonight to get some ideas about what people would like to see, what specific agenda items people would like to see gone into in more depth. And these can be historic things from the BVR, they can be stuff that are going forward. So I'm happy to hear from the floor about any items they want. If you want more time to think about it and consult, then you can, by all means. But obviously we need to give Mark, who's going to have a few words, some notice about those issues.
Thank you, Chair. I have got a draft work programme which includes 2 additional meetings from items that members raised at the July meeting. So if that's helpful, I can circulate that first thing in the morning and members can see if they're happy with the items that are on there, and then we can maybe move from there. I'm just thinking of time restrictions, obviously, so that officers have enough time to write the reports as well.
So the draft at the moment includes an update on the BVI report, the Tilbury to Gravesend Ferry, an update on the local plan, an update on the A13, and the Thurrock Enhanced Partnership. And we have the Grays Underpass as well on there. I know that's part of November, is it?
Should have Stamford Hope Station as a regular comeback.
We've got November on there?
You should have PCRL Regeneration.
It was the Freeport, Integrated Transport Block and Work Programme. So is there anything that we would like to perhaps push back out of that list? If there's any, so Stamford Hope Station is a big...
That's currently down as November.
Are we happy to leave that until November, if that's in November? Yeah, go for it.
I was going to ask for Purfleet.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I think what needs to happen, personally, is that the Cabinet and the ONS needs to dovetail together. And obviously the papers that are going to Cabinet that is prudent to what should be at Regeneration ONS needs to be programmed in here. Now, if there is things being moved around through Cabinet, it has to have the right process. So we have got these extraordinary meetings now. So Cllr, can you, if that's okay with you, Chair, can you and Mark have a conversation about what's going, because it sounds like Cabinet, different things are going on to Cabinet now that probably should come here first. And also, if there's anything to do with anything on regeneration and maybe the asset disposal or whatever, we need to have a see on anything to do with that. Is that okay? Is that okay, Chair? Thank you.
And with these agendas, obviously, if you could copy the whole committee in and not just myself, I'm more than happy for these decisions to be made collectively rather than just myself.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that and share a suggested agenda because, yes, there has been some reprofiling of the timing of certain papers to go to Cabinet and having an additional meeting in September because the October O&S was after the October Cabinet and now we've got an opportunity to have a consideration before the October Cabinet.
Councillor Watson.
Can we also make sure that the portfolio holders have also got their session in? I'm not bothered if they're both together or separate. I'll leave that down to Councillor Jeffries and mainly to sort that out. Is that okay? Thanks.
Perfect. Any other comments from the floor? Well, that concludes the end of this extraordinary meeting. So thank you very much for attending. I thought it was quite valuable and I'm really glad that we're going to get to a consensus position on our consultation response. So thanks very much.